My boyfriend constantly called me ugly. Then his plastic surgery got botched. You need to lose at least 10 pounds before my company party, Liam said while pinching the skin on my waist. I can't have people thinking I'm settling for a cow. Liam worked as a personal trainer at an exclusive gym where only models and influencers could afford memberships. He'd come home and point out everything wrong with my body like I was a project he needed to fix. But he had no idea I'd started secretly saving money to leave him. Each time he tore me down, I'd transfer another $20 to my secret account and imagine the day I could walk away forever. Liam's comments got meaner every day. Your nose is too wide for photos, he'd say, while taking dozens of shots until he found one that didn't embarrass him. Then he'd spend an hour editing my face before posting anything because he said my natural features would make him look bad. By our 6-month anniversary, he was circling parts of my body with a red pen like I was homework. I'm just trying to help you become the best version of yourself, Liam would say, while making lists of everything wrong with how I looked. But I'd been saving for 8 months and was only 3 weeks away from having enough for my security deposit. Most guys wouldn't care enough to point out areas for improvement, but I want us both to look amazing together. He'd make me stand next to him in mirrors comparing our reflections while I counted down the days until freedom. Liam's friends were all fitness models and Instagram influencers who treated appearance like a competition. His best friend Ryan owned a supplement company and would rank women right in front of them. Your girlfriend's maybe a 6 on a good day, Ryan told Liam while I sat there dying inside. You could definitely upgrade if you wanted to. I had my apartment picked out and the lease ready to sign the following week. She's going to ruin our group photos in Miami, one of his friends announced while we were at brunch. All the other girls are going to be Instagram ready and she's going to stick out like a sore thumb. Liam nodded seriously like they were discussing replacing broken furniture. But then Liam decided he needed to level up his appearance before the Miami trip and booked multiple procedures at once. I'm getting my jaw sharpened and my nose refined plus cheek implants, he announced while scrolling through before and after photos. He was so excited about his transformation that he'd already planned the photo shoot to debut his new face. I was supposed to sign my lease the day after his surgery and finally escape. But something went horribly wrong during Liam's procedures, and the doctor had to call an ambulance when his face started swelling way beyond normal. The jaw implants shifted and got infected while the nose job collapsed one nostril completely. His cheeks looked like someone had blown up balloons under his skin, and the infection spread to his eye area, making him look like he'd been attacked by bees. Watching him cry over his ruined reflection made me feel terrible for planning to abandon him. I canceled my apartment viewing and decided to stay, because I thought maybe this experience would humble him and make him a better person. The infection needed 3 more surgeries, but each one made Liam's face worse. His jaw was crooked and lopsided while his nose had a huge dent down the middle. One cheek was way bigger than the other, and his left eye drooped from nerve damage. I held his hand through every doctor appointment thinking this tragedy would teach him kindness. But instead of becoming better, Liam turned into a complete monster who blamed everyone else for his problems. This is your fault for not supporting me properly before my surgery, he screamed when his gym fired him. If you'd been prettier, I wouldn't have needed to get work done in the first place. He started treating me worse than ever because I was the only person left who couldn't disappear. His shallow friends ran away the second they saw his ruined face. Nobody wants to look at that while they're working out, his boss explained while Liam begged to keep his job. All the people who used to worship his perfect face now crossed the street to avoid him. Instead of learning anything from being rejected, Liam just got angrier and meaner, especially toward me. You're probably happy this happened to me, he'd snap while staring at his reflection. Now you don't have to feel ugly anymore because we both look like monsters. I realized I'd made a huge mistake staying with him when Liam started taking his anger out on me physically. He'd throw things when he was mad and blame me for everything bad that happened. I should have dumped you months ago, he'd scream during his daily meltdowns. Now I'm stuck with you because no one else will ever want either of us. I started saving money again, but this time I was scared of what he'd do if he caught me. I was secretly packing a bag when Liam caught me putting clothes in my car, and his face twisted into that familiar rage I'd learned to fear. You think you can just leave me after I wasted 2 years trying to fix you? He snarled while blocking my path to the door. I know where you work and I'll show up every day. His voice got lower and more threatening as he stepped closer. I held up my hands and forced my voice to stay calm even though my heart was pounding, so hard I could feel it in my throat. I promised him we'd sit down tomorrow and talk everything through properly when we were both less upset. Liam's face stayed twisted for another few seconds before he stepped back and nodded slowly like he'd won something. I locked myself in the bathroom as soon as he moved away from the door and sat on the floor with my phone. My hands shook so badly I had to type the message to my coworker 3 times before it made sense. I told her I was sick and couldn't make my morning shift, and she sent back a thumbs up without asking questions. I knew I needed to make a real plan before Liam caught me trying to pack again, because next time he might not just block the door. I stayed in that bathroom for 2 hours until I heard him go to bed, and then I crept out to the couch where I lay awake counting the minutes until morning. The next day, I waited until I heard the shower running before I grabbed my keys and practically ran to my car in the parking lot. I sat there with the doors locked and my phone in my lap trying to figure out what to do next. I searched for domestic violence resources and found a hotline number that I stared at for 5 full minutes before I could make myself dial. A woman answered on the second ring and asked if I was in a safe place to talk right now. I told her I was in my car and my boyfriend was in the shower, and I probably had 20 minutes before he'd notice I was gone. She didn't rush me or act like I was wasting her time, even though I kept stopping to cry. We stayed on the phone for 40 minutes while she asked me questions about what had been happening and how long it had been going on. She helped me understand that blocking my exit and threatening to stalk my workplace wasn't just relationship drama like I'd been telling myself. She said those were serious warning signs of abuse, and that the situation would probably get worse, not better. I felt stupid for not seeing it sooner, but she told me that abusers are really good at making you doubt yourself. She asked if I had family nearby or somewhere safe I could stay, and I admitted that I'd pushed everyone away because Liam always found reasons why my friends were bad influences. She connected me with someone named Lena McLaughlin, who was a local advocate who helped people in situations like mine. Lena agreed to meet me during my lunch break at a coffee shop 3 blocks from where I worked. I got there early and sat in the back corner where I could see the door because I was paranoid that Liam would somehow know where I was. Lena walked in exactly on time, and she looked normal and kind, not like someone who would judge me for staying with Liam after his surgeries went wrong. She sat down across from me, and the first thing she said was that nothing I told her would shock her or make her think less of me. That made me start crying before I even said anything about what had been happening. I told her about the door blocking incident and the threats, and how scared I was that Liam would find out I was planning to leave. Lena listened to everything without interrupting, and then she pulled out a notebook and said we were going to make a safety plan together. She explained that leaving an abusive partner was actually the most dangerous time, and I needed to be strategic instead of just brave. She wrote down specific steps I should take, like keeping important documents at work where Liam couldn't get to them. She told me to set up code words with people I trusted, so I could signal for help without Liam knowing. She said I needed to make copies of everything financial, so I'd have proof of what money was mine if things got legal. Writing it all down made it feel more real and less overwhelming because I had actual steps to follow instead of just panic. I started moving things to my work locker the very next day, in amounts small enough that Liam wouldn't notice my closet getting emptier. I brought an extra pair of jeans and 2 shirts folded flat in my gym bag. The day after that, I brought toiletries and my phone charger and some underwear. Each time I hid something away, it felt like I was taking back a tiny piece of control over my own life. I made copies of my birth certificate and social security card at the library and tucked them into a folder at the bottom of my locker under my winter coat. I photographed every page of our bank statements and uploaded them to a cloud account Liam didn't know existed. Every single item I moved felt dangerous, like I was building a bomb that would explode if Liam discovered what I was doing. But it also felt necessary, like I was finally doing something instead of just waiting for things to get worse. Lena called me on my burner phone 3 days after our coffee shop meeting to check how the safety planning was going. She asked if I'd checked my regular phone for spyware because abusers often use technology to track their partners without them knowing. I felt my stomach drop because I hadn't even thought about that possibility. She walked me through how to check my data usage, and I found weird spikes at times when I definitely wasn't using my phone. There were chunks of data being used at 3 in the morning when I was asleep, and during my work shifts when my phone was in my locker. Lena said that was a pretty clear sign that something was running in the background sending information somewhere. She told me not to delete anything suspicious because that might alert Liam that I knew he was monitoring me. Instead, she said I should get a cheap burner phone for any communication about leaving and keep my regular phone acting normal so he wouldn't get suspicious. I bought the burner phone at a convenience store the next day and paid cash so there wouldn't be a record on our bank statement. I only used it to text Lena and to call the hotline when I needed to talk through my fear. I kept my regular phone charged and visible, and I made sure to use it for normal things like checking social media and texting coworkers about schedule swaps. Having the secret phone felt both powerful and scary because I was actively lying to someone who already scared me. Every time I pulled it out to text Lena, I looked over my shoulder to make sure Liam wasn't somehow watching. The phone lived in my work locker inside a sock tucked into my winter boot where nobody would ever look for it. I felt like I was living 2 separate lives, and keeping them from touching each other took constant attention and energy. Liam showed up at my work on a Tuesday afternoon when I was cleaning equipment between client sessions. I looked up and he was just standing there in the lobby with a paper bag that he claimed was lunch he'd brought to surprise me. But I could tell from his eyes that he was checking up on me to see if I was acting different or suspicious. My manager Henry was at the front desk, and he noticed how I froze when I saw Liam standing there. Henry walked over and very politely told Liam that he couldn't be in the gym area unless he had a membership, and would he mind waiting in the lobby instead. Liam's face did that thing where it got tight and angry, but he couldn't make a scene in public, so he just smiled with no warmth and said he'd wait outside. I watched him walk out through the glass doors, and I felt sick knowing he'd driven all the way here just to make sure I wasn't doing anything behind his back. Henry came over as soon as Liam left and asked quietly if everything was okay at home. Something about the way he asked made me just break down right there next to the weight racks. I told him enough that he understood I was scared and trying to leave, but that Liam was watching me constantly. Henry didn't ask a bunch of questions or try to give me advice he couldn't possibly understand. He just said he was going to adjust my schedule, so I worked during busy times when there were always other people around. He said he'd alert the security guard about Liam and make sure everyone at the front desk knew not to give out any information about my shifts or schedule. He told me I could use his office anytime I needed a private place to make phone calls or just breathe. Having someone at work who knew what was happening made me feel slightly less alone, even though I was still terrified about what would happen when I actually tried to leave. I started taking photos of everything Liam damaged when he got angry. I photographed the dent in the wall from when he threw his phone during a fight about his face. I took pictures of the broken lamp and the shattered picture frame and the door that didn't close right anymore because he'd slammed it so hard. I made sure every photo had a timestamp and I wrote notes about what had happened right before he broke each thing. Lena had taught me that documentation was crucial if I needed to get a protective order because judges wanted to see patterns, not just one bad incident. Building a case against someone I'd lived with for 2 years felt clinical and sad, like I was gathering evidence for a trial that hadn't started yet. But every photo I took was proof that I wasn't crazy or overreacting, and that what was happening was real and dangerous and getting worse. I pulled up the leasing office number on my burner phone and dialed while sitting in my car during my lunch break. A woman named Daisy Garner answered, and I explained that I'd been interested in a studio apartment months ago, but had to cancel. She put me on hold for a minute, then came back and told me there was a wait list, but she could add my name with a note about my situation. She started listing what I'd need, and my chest got tight as she went through each requirement. First month's rent, last month's rent, security deposit, and proof of income all due before I could move in. I did the math in my head while she talked and realized I was still about $800 short of what I needed. The number felt huge and impossible even though I'd been saving for months. I thanked Daisy and told her I'd call back when I had everything ready. Then I sat in my car staring at my bank app trying to figure out how to come up with the rest faster. That night after Liam fell asleep, I logged into our joint account on my phone and transferred $40 to my secret account. My fingers shook over the confirm button because even though it was money from my own paychecks, it felt like stealing. I'd been putting my whole paycheck into the joint account for 2 years because Liam said couples should share everything. Now I was taking it back in tiny pieces and hoping he wouldn't notice the pattern. I transferred another $20 2 days later, then $30 the day after that. Each time I changed the amount and waited different numbers of days between transfers so it wouldn't look obvious in the transaction history. The guilt sat heavy in my stomach even though Lena had told me this was my money, and I had every right to access it. Liam had twisted my thinking so badly that protecting myself felt like betraying him. I started keeping a spreadsheet on my secret phone tracking every transfer and how much more I needed to reach my goal. Liam's moods became completely unpredictable, and I stopped trying to figure out what would set him off. One night, he'd be sobbing on the bathroom floor, apologizing for everything he'd said and done, swearing he'd get help and be better. He'd tell me he loved me and couldn't live without me, and that his face getting messed up had made him realize what really mattered. Then the next morning, he'd wake up screaming that I was the reason his life fell apart, and if I'd been supportive enough, he never would have needed surgery in the first place. I used to try calming him down or reasoning with him or believing the apologies were real. Now I just watched the cycle repeat itself like I was studying a weather pattern. When he cried, I stayed quiet and let him talk himself out. When he raged, I kept my face blank and waited for it to pass. Staying emotionally detached helped me think clearly about my escape plan, instead of getting sucked back into hoping he'd change. The pattern was always the same, and it was never going to be different no matter what he promised. I noticed Liam started posting weird stuff on social media about loyalty and fake friends. One post said something about how you find out who really cares when you're going through hard times, and most people just disappear. Another one was about how some people only stick around when things are good, but bail the second life gets difficult. He never mentioned me by name, but it was obvious he was trying to make me feel guilty for wanting to leave. I took screenshots of every single post with the date and time visible. Lena had explained that this kind of manipulation was part of the abuse pattern, and judges needed to see the whole picture, not just the physical stuff. I created a folder on my secret cloud storage labeled with random letters and numbers and uploaded every screenshot there. Watching him try to guilt-trip me publicly just made me more determined to get out. I spent an evening changing every password I could think of except for the bank accounts because that might tip him off. I updated my email password, my social media passwords, my work portal login, everything. Then I set up 2-factor authentication on my new email address and the cloud storage where I kept all my evidence. Each small security measure made me feel slightly less vulnerable, like I was building a wall between us, one brick at a time. Liam had my old passwords for everything because he used to check my phone whenever he wanted to make sure I wasn't talking to other guys. Now he wouldn't be able to access anything new I created. The next morning, I called the non-emergency police line from the parking lot at work. An officer named Vicente Reardon answered, and I explained my situation as calmly as I could. I told him about the property damage and the threats, and asked what options existed before things got worse. Vicente didn't make me feel stupid for calling before something major happened. He explained that I could file reports for each incident of property damage and harassment, even if they seemed small individually. He said multiple reports create a paper trail that shows a pattern of behavior, and that pattern is what judges look at when deciding on protective orders. I told him about the dented wall and broken lamp, and he said I should document everything with photos and file a report. He gave me his direct number and told me to call him specifically if anything else happened. Having a police officer who knew my situation and took it seriously made me feel less alone in this. During my shift, I went to my locker and grabbed my spare car key that I kept on a hook inside. I took it home, and the next day I brought it back and hid it in a different part of my locker under some gym clothes. If Liam ever took my main keys to trap me, I'd still have a way to leave. I also started driving different routes to and from work and varying the times I left by 10 or 15 minutes when my schedule allowed. Liam had started timing how long my commute took, and questioning me if I was even 5 minutes later than usual. The constant need to stay unpredictable was exhausting, but it was necessary to keep him from controlling every part of my day. I was scrolling through my phone one evening when Liam grabbed it out of my hand. He started going through my photos and found some old pictures from before we dated. They were just normal photos of me with friends, but he stared at them with this look on his face that made my skin crawl. He said he was going to post edited versions that made me look bad and ruin my reputation if I tried to leave him. He said everyone would see what I really looked like and know that he'd been trying to help me improve myself. My hands went cold, but I kept my voice steady and told him those were private photos. As soon as he went to the bathroom, I grabbed my laptop and backed up every single photo and video from my phone to my secret cloud account. Then I opened a document and started writing out a timeline of our entire relationship with specific dates and details about when his behavior changed. I wrote about the red pen incident and the comments about my appearance and the surgery and everything that happened after. Creating a written record with dates made the abuse feel more real and less like something I might be exaggerating in my head. Lena called me the next day and said she'd found a legal clinic that helped domestic violence survivors with protective orders and other legal stuff. She explained that they worked on a sliding scale based on income and had experience with cases like mine. The intake appointment was scheduled for 5 days from now, which felt both way too far away and way too soon. I was scared of what starting legal action would mean and whether it would make Liam more dangerous. But I was also scared of what would happen if I didn't do anything and just kept living like this. Lena reminded me that I was already in danger and taking legal steps was about protecting myself, not making things worse. One night, Liam passed out drunk on the couch around 9. I grabbed a blanket from the closet and my phone charger and went out to my car in the parking lot. I reclined the driver's seat as far as it would go and tried to get comfortable. The seat was hard and the angle was weird and every sound outside made me jump. I kept my doors locked and my phone in my hand ready to call for help if Liam woke up and came looking for me. I didn't actually sleep much, but I stayed there until 5 in the morning just to see if it was possible. When I finally went back inside, Liam was still passed out exactly where I'd left him. Knowing I had a backup plan if things got really bad helped me breathe a little easier, even though sleeping in my car was uncomfortable and scary. At least it was an option if I needed to disappear quickly and had nowhere else to go. The next morning at work, Henry pulled me aside before my shift started and said he was moving me to daylight hours only starting immediately. He explained that he'd already talked to the other trainers about covering my evening slots, and nobody had any problem with the switch. Then he walked me down to the security desk and introduced me to both guards on rotation, showing them a photo of Liam from the gym's old employee files. He told them to call him directly if Liam showed up at any time, and to not let him pass the front desk under any circumstances. Having my manager take my safety this seriously without making me beg or explain everything made me feel like maybe I wasn't crazy for being scared. Henry also gave me his personal cell number and told me to text him when I got home each night, so he'd know I made it safely. Walking back to the training floor, I felt less alone than I had in months, because someone with actual authority was treating this like the emergency it was. 2 days later, Daisy called while I was restocking towels in the equipment room. She said a small studio apartment might be available in about 2 weeks, and I needed to be ready to move fast with my application and deposit money when she got confirmation. The rent was more than I wanted to pay, but it was in a building with security cameras and a locked entry system which felt worth the extra cost. She explained I'd need first month's rent plus security deposit up front, then last month's rent within 30 days of moving in. And I did the math in my head and realized I was about $400 short of what I needed even with all my secret saving. Daisy said she'd hold the application for me as long as possible, but other people were interested and she couldn't make any promises. I thanked her and hung up, feeling both excited and panicked about how I was going to come up with the rest of the money in time. The next afternoon, a huge flower arrangement showed up at the gym's front desk with my name on it. The card had 3 paragraphs in Liam's handwriting about how he knew he'd been difficult lately, but his recovery had been hard and he loved me and needed me to be patient with him. He wrote that I was the only person who hadn't abandoned him, and he was grateful for my loyalty and support. Reading his words made my skin crawl because I knew this was just another manipulation tactic to keep me trapped. I took photos of the flowers and the card from multiple angles with my phone, making sure the date and timestamps were visible. Then I opened my documentation file and logged the delivery as attempted manipulation following the pattern Lena had warned me about. I left the flowers at the front desk and told the receptionist she could take them home if she wanted them, because I didn't need them cluttering up my space. Over the next week, I started moving my most important belongings to my work locker in small batches. I brought my grandmother's jewelry and my favorite books and the photo albums from before I met Liam. Each day I'd take 1 or 2 items from the apartment and replace them with less meaningful things from storage or stuff I didn't care about losing. I rearranged the closet so the empty spaces weren't obvious, and I moved remaining clothes around to fill the gaps. But Liam still noticed something felt different, even though he couldn't figure out exactly what had changed. He stood in the bedroom doorway one evening, staring at the shelves and the dresser with this confused look on his face. Then he asked if I'd gotten rid of some of my stuff, and I told him I was just organizing and decluttering like he always said I should do. He seemed to accept that explanation, but kept looking around suspiciously for the rest of the night. I knew the window for getting out safely was closing fast because eventually he'd realize what I was actually doing. 3 days before my legal clinic appointment, Liam ambushed me in the gym parking lot right after my shift ended. He was waiting by my car when I came out, and he blocked the driver's side door with his body when I tried to get in. He demanded to know why I'd been acting distant and cold toward him lately. I kept my hand in my jacket pocket with my fingers on my phone's record button, starting an audio recording while I tried to keep my voice calm. I told him I wasn't being distant and that I was just tired from work and dealing with stress. He stepped closer and said he knew I was planning something and he wanted to know what it was. I could smell alcohol on his breath even though it was only 6 in the evening. I told him there was nothing to know and I just needed some space to deal with everything. He grabbed my wrist and squeezed it hard enough to hurt and said he wasn't stupid, and he could tell when someone was lying to him. I pulled my hand away and told him he was scaring me and people were watching from the gym windows. That made him look around and notice the security guard standing at the front door. He stepped back and said this conversation wasn't over, but he'd let me go home for now. I got in my car and locked the doors immediately, then sat there shaking for 10 minutes before I felt steady enough to drive. The legal clinic appointment went better than I expected. The attorney looked through all my documentation and photos and said I had a strong case for a temporary protective order. She helped me fill out the petition forms, listing specific incidents with dates, and describing the pattern of escalating threats and intimidation. She explained that the judge could grant a temporary order pretty quickly based on my sworn statement and evidence. Then there'd be a full hearing later where both sides could present their cases. The temporary order would require Liam to stay away from me and have no contact while we waited for the hearing date. She said the process usually took 1 to 2 weeks from filing to getting the temporary order issued. I signed all the paperwork, and she said she'd file it with the court first thing the next morning. Walking out of the clinic, I felt like I'd just taken the first real step toward freedom instead of just planning and preparing. That same afternoon, Daisy called with good news about the studio apartment. She said it was definitely available and she could work with me on the deposit amount if I had documentation from a domestic violence advocate explaining my situation. I immediately called Lena and explained what Daisy needed. Lena said she'd write a letter that afternoon confirming she'd been working with me and describing the circumstances without giving too many personal details. She emailed me the letter within 2 hours and I forwarded it straight to Daisy. Daisy called back 20 minutes later and said the letter was perfect and she could accept a smaller deposit with the rest due within 60 days. She sent me the application paperwork and said if I could get everything back to her by tomorrow, she'd hold the apartment for me. I filled out every form that night at work during my break and scanned them all from the office printer. Finally, having actual housing lined up made the escape plan feel real instead of just theoretical. But then Liam noticed more of my things were missing from the apartment. He started going through the closet and the bathroom cabinets and the kitchen drawers, getting more agitated as he realized how much was gone. He cornered me in the living room and accused me of planning to leave him, his voice getting louder and more threatening with each word. I forced myself to stay calm and told him I'd just been throwing away old stuff and organizing better like he wanted. He said I was lying and he knew exactly what I was doing. I could see his hands clenching into fists, and I knew this could turn violent fast. I told him he was being paranoid and making something out of nothing. He stared at me for a long time like he was trying to decide whether to believe me. Finally, he said he was watching me and I better not try anything stupid. Then he went into the bedroom and slammed the door hard enough to rattle the walls. I sat on the couch barely breathing, knowing I'd bought myself maybe a few more days, but that was it. 2 days later, I came out to my car after work and found a huge dent in the driver's side door with deep scratches running along the panel. The damage looked deliberate, like someone had hit it with something heavy and then keyed it on purpose. I took photos from every angle and called the non-emergency police number right there in the parking lot. Vicente responded to my call and came to look at the damage. He took his own photos and wrote up a report, noting that this was my 3rd incident involving Liam. I told him about the parking lot confrontation, and he added that to the report too. He said to get repair estimates from a body shop and include those in my evidence file. The damage was going to cost at least $800 to fix, which I definitely didn't have. But Vicente said the documentation was more important than getting it repaired right away. He told me the pattern of escalating behavior was clear, and the protective order petition should go through without any problems. The temporary protective order petition got filed the next morning, and Vicente served Liam with the notice that afternoon. The notice explained there was a hearing scheduled in 1 week, and that Liam needed to stay away from me until then. Within an hour of being served, Liam started sending me text after text about how I was destroying his life and ruining everything. He said I was a terrible person for abandoning him when he needed me most. He said the protective order was going to make it impossible for him to find work or housing. He said I'd regret doing this to him. I didn't respond to any of the messages. Instead, I forwarded every single text to both Lena and Vicente, creating a record of him harassing me immediately after being served with a no-contact order. Vicente texted back saying he'd document the violation and include it in his report to the court. Lena called to check on me and remind me that Liam's reaction proved exactly why I needed the protective order in the first place. Sitting in my car reading his angry messages, I felt scared, but also relieved because now there was official legal protection between us, and I wasn't facing this alone anymore. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from Liam and a voicemail where he screamed that I'd stolen thousands of dollars from him and he was going to report me to the police for theft. My hands shook while I listened to him ranting about how I'd been secretly taking his money for months, and he had proof. I immediately logged into my bank account and started downloading every statement from the past 2 years. Each deposit showed my paycheck from the gym, and each transfer to my secret account came directly from money I'd earned. I spent 3 hours going through everything and highlighting where my income came from versus Liam's unemployment payments that he kept in a separate account. I made copies of my pay stubs showing exact amounts that matched my deposits, and I organized everything by date in a folder. Then I texted Lena photos of all the documentation and asked if this was enough to prove the money was mine. She called me back within 10 minutes and said the bank records were perfect evidence and that Liam's theft accusation was just another control tactic. She told me to forward his threatening voicemail to Vicente, so it would be documented as harassment after being served with the protective order. I felt slightly better knowing I had proof, but my stomach still hurt thinking about Liam trying to get me arrested. That same afternoon, Daisy called with news about the studio apartment. She said a tenant was moving out early and the unit would be ready in 12 days, which was exactly 2 days after my protective order hearing. I'd need to sign the lease and move in within 10 days of the hearing date, or they'd have to offer it to the next person on the wait list. The timeline felt impossible because I needed the protective order approved first, then coordinate the actual move, then get the lease signed all within a tiny window. I started panicking about how to make everything line up perfectly, when one wrong thing could destroy the whole plan. Daisy said she could hold the apartment for me until the day after the hearing, but not any longer than that because of their policies. I called Lena right away, and she helped me map out a detailed schedule on her calendar. We marked the hearing date, then the move-out day 2 days before that, then all the preparation steps I needed to finish before moving day. Lena wrote down exactly what needed to happen each day, and in what order, so nothing would get missed. Looking at the timeline made it feel slightly more possible, but I was still scared about what could go wrong. 2 days later, I was working my afternoon shift at the gym, when the front desk called back to the equipment area saying someone was asking for me. I walked to the lobby and found Liam standing there looking angry and talking too loud. He demanded I come outside and talk to him right now because we needed to discuss the court situation. I took one step backward and told him he wasn't supposed to be here because of the protective order. He got louder and said the order didn't mean anything yet and I couldn't just ignore him after everything we'd been through together. Henry appeared from his office and walked directly between us. He told Liam he needed to leave the building immediately, or security would be called. Liam started yelling about how I was his girlfriend and he had a right to talk to me. Henry pulled out his phone and told the front desk to call security and get a ride share to the back entrance. Then he put his hand on my shoulder and walked me through the staff area toward the rear exit. I could hear Liam shouting behind us, but Henry kept moving me forward. The security guard arrived and started escorting Liam toward the front door while Liam screamed threats about how this wasn't over. Henry waited with me at the back entrance until the rideshare pulled up and he made sure I got in safely. He said he was filing an incident report about the disruption and would send a copy to Vicente. During the whole ride home, I couldn't stop shaking and kept checking behind us to make sure Liam wasn't following. The next morning, I packed a second emergency bag with more clothes and important papers and took it to work. I found my coworker Sarah, who I'd known for 3 years and trusted completely. I explained that I was leaving an abusive relationship and needed her to hold this bag for me as backup. I told her to only give it to me directly, or if something happened to me, she should call the police right away. Sarah hugged me and said she'd keep it locked in her car trunk where nobody would find it. Having backup plans for my backup plans felt crazy, but I kept thinking about all the ways Liam might try to stop me. Sarah asked if I was safe, and I told her about the protective order hearing coming up. She offered to take time off work to come to court with me, but I said having her hold the emergency bag was more helpful. Walking away from her car knowing I had another safety net made me feel slightly less trapped. That afternoon, I met Lena at the legal clinic, and we practiced my testimony for the protective order hearing. She had me go through specific incidents with exact dates and details about what Liam did and said. Every time I started crying or getting emotional, she'd stop me and remind me to stick to facts. She explained that judges respond better to calm factual testimony than emotional breakdowns, even though my feelings were completely valid. We went through the door-blocking incident, the car damage, the workplace confrontations, and all the threatening messages. Lena made me practice describing each event in clear, simple terms without adding my opinions or feelings. She taught me to say things like he blocked my exit and threatened to stalk my workplace instead of he made me feel scared and trapped. We rehearsed for 2 hours until I could get through the whole timeline without crying or losing focus. Lena said I was ready, and that my documentation was strong enough to get the protective order extended. Driving home, I kept repeating the key points in my head so I wouldn't forget them under pressure. I started listing furniture and household items on online marketplace sites that same week. I took photos of the couch, the coffee table, some lamps and kitchen stuff that belonged to me. When Liam asked what I was doing, I told him I was decluttering to make the apartment look nicer like he always wanted. He seemed pleased that I was finally listening to his suggestions about improving our space. Buyers started messaging me, and I coordinated pickups for times when Liam would be out. Each person who came to get something represented one less item he could destroy when he figured out I was leaving. Every piece of furniture that left felt like cutting another rope tying me to this trapped life. I sold the bookshelf I'd bought before moving in with him, and remembered how hopeful I'd felt back then. I sold the kitchen table where he'd circled my body parts with red pen, and felt relieved to see it go. The apartment started looking emptier, but Liam just thought I was following his advice about minimalist living. By the end of the week, I'd made $400 and reduced my belongings to things I could fit in one van load. 3 days before the hearing, my phone buzzed with a text from Liam saying I was going to regret taking him to court. He wrote that he'd make sure everyone knew what kind of person I really was, and that I'd destroyed his life on purpose. The message went on about how he'd tell everyone at my work and my family about all my flaws and mistakes. He said people would see the truth about me and nobody would want to help me anymore. I read it twice while my heart pounded, and then I took screenshots of the entire conversation. I forwarded the screenshots to both Lena and Vicente without typing any response back to Liam. Lena texted back immediately saying this was perfect evidence of continued harassment and threats. Vicente replied that he was adding it to his report, and that these kinds of messages would help at the hearing. Not responding to Liam felt powerful, because I was letting his own words build the case against him, instead of getting pulled into his drama. The next day at work, Henry pulled me aside and said he had my next day off marked on his calendar. He offered to help me move since he knew the hearing was coming up soon. I almost cried with relief because having someone physically strong and protective there would make everything feel safer. Henry said he'd bring his truck too in case I needed extra space beyond the rental van. He told me to text him the exact time and address, and he'd be there ready to work. I thanked him about 5 times, and he just said that nobody should have to escape alone. Knowing Henry would be there made the plan feel actually possible instead of terrifying. But I was still scared about what Liam might do when he realized I was really leaving for good. I kept imagining him showing up and causing a huge scene or getting violent. Henry must have seen the fear on my face because he said we'd work fast and get everything done quickly. He also said if Liam showed up, he'd handle it while I stayed safe. Having someone on my side who was bigger and stronger than Liam made me feel protected for the first time in months. Move-out day finally arrived, and I woke up at 6 in the morning with my stomach in knots. I'd checked Liam's probation schedule and knew he had a mandatory check-in appointment at 9 that would keep him away for at least 2 hours. I rented a small cargo van from the place down the street and drove it to the apartment complex. Henry was already waiting in the parking lot when I pulled up. We didn't waste time talking and just started loading boxes I'd packed the night before while Liam was passed out. Henry carried the heavy furniture while I grabbed bags of clothes and personal items. We moved everything in silence and kept watching the parking lot entrance for Liam's car. Every noise made me jump and my hands were sweating so badly I kept dropping things. Henry stayed calm and focused and kept us moving at a steady pace. We got my bed frame disassembled and into the van along with my dresser and the few remaining items I cared about. The apartment looked sad and empty with just Liam's stuff scattered around. I grabbed my documents from their hiding spot in the closet and threw them in a box. We'd been working for about 90 minutes when I heard a car door slam in the parking lot. Liam's voice echoed up the stairwell before I even saw him. He was yelling my name and his footsteps were pounding on the stairs. Henry and I both froze with boxes in our hands. Then Liam appeared at the top of the stairs and his face twisted into that expression I'd learned meant danger. He looked at the van parked below and then at us carrying my things, and his whole body went rigid with rage. He moved to block the stairwell exit and planted himself in the middle so we couldn't get past. His voice came out low and mean when he said I wasn't going anywhere until we talked. He demanded I give him my phone right then because he knew I'd been planning this behind his back. Liam said he deserved to see what I'd been hiding and who I'd been talking to about him. He took a step closer and I backed up against the railing. Henry moved between us and told Liam to step aside. But Liam just kept demanding my phone and saying he had a right to know what I'd been plotting. His hands were shaking and I couldn't tell if he was about to cry or explode. Everything I'd been afraid of was happening right now, and I had to figure out what to do before this got worse. I looked at Henry and forced my voice to stay steady when I asked if he remembered to lock the storage unit. Henry's eyes met mine and I saw the moment he understood what I meant. He pulled out his phone and started recording video while he told Liam to step aside and let us leave. Liam's face twisted with confusion and then rage when he realized what was happening. He lunged forward and grabbed my wrist so hard I felt his fingers dig into my skin. I dropped to the floor like Lena had taught me during our safety planning sessions. I started yelling as loud as I could that someone needed to call the police right now. Henry kept his phone pointed at us while he shouted for help. Doors opened up and down the hallway and neighbors stuck their heads out to see what was going on. Liam tried to pull me up, but I kept my body low and kept yelling. An older woman 3 doors down already had her phone out and was talking to someone. A younger guy came out of his apartment and asked if everything was okay. Henry told him to stay back but keep watching while he called 911 himself. Liam finally let go of my wrist and backed away when he saw all the witnesses. His hands were shaking and his face was red. He started saying I was crazy and making a scene over nothing, but the red marks on my wrist were already showing up dark against my skin. Henry kept recording everything while we waited for the police. My heart was beating. So fast I thought I might throw up. Liam paced back and forth on the landing and kept muttering about how I was ruining his life. The neighbors stayed in their doorways watching. Nobody came closer, but nobody went back inside either. It felt like forever before I heard sirens getting louder. Vicente pulled up in his patrol car and came up the stairs with another officer. He looked at me sitting on the ground and then at Liam and then at Henry still holding his phone up. Vicente separated us right away and had the other officer take Liam down to the parking lot. He asked if I was hurt and I showed him my wrist. He took photos with his phone and wrote down what happened. Henry showed him the video he'd recorded of everything. Vicente talked to the older woman who called 911 first, and she told him she heard me screaming and saw Liam grab me. The younger guy confirmed he saw the same thing. Vicente wrote everything down in his notebook. He told me this was my 3rd report about Liam, and that I had a protective order hearing coming up. He said this fresh incident with witnesses and video evidence would help my case. Vicente called someone on his radio and then told me a judge was still at the courthouse handling emergency orders. He said we could go right now and try to get a temporary order based on what just happened. I nodded and stood up with shaky legs. Vicente went downstairs and talked to Liam for a long time. I could hear Liam's voice getting louder, but I couldn't make out the words. Vicente came back up and said we should go to the courthouse now while everything was fresh. Henry said he'd stay with the van until I got back. I rode in Vicente's patrol car to the courthouse, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The judge saw me within an hour, and I showed her the marks on my wrist and the photos Vicente had taken. I told her about the move-out attempt and how Liam blocked the exit and grabbed me. The judge looked at Vicente's report and the witness statements. She signed the temporary protective order right there, and Vicente went back to serve it to Liam. The judge told me the order meant Liam had to stay away from me and my workplace, and if he came near me, he'd be arrested immediately. I felt something loosen in my chest when she said that. Vicente drove me back to the apartment complex and Liam was gone. His car wasn't in the parking lot anymore. Vicente said he'd served the order and warned Liam that any contact would mean jail time. Liam had driven off making threats under his breath, but he was legally required to stay away now. Henry was sitting in the van waiting, and he looked relieved when he saw me. We finished loading my stuff while Vicente waited in his car nearby. Every time I went back into the apartment, I expected Liam to appear, but he didn't. We got the last boxes and my kitchen stuff packed up. I grabbed my laptop and chargers and the few photos I actually cared about. The apartment looked empty and sad with just Liam's things scattered around. I didn't feel bad about leaving anymore. I went to the office and turned in my keys with a written statement about what happened. The woman at the desk looked uncomfortable, but she took the keys and the letter. Henry drove the van to my new studio, and Vicente followed us there. Daisy was waiting with a contractor who changed all the locks even though Liam never had keys to this place. The contractor installed a deadbolt and a chain lock. He showed me how everything worked and gave me the only copies of the new keys. Daisy handed me a packet about the building's safety features and the domestic violence support program. She said my mail would be held at the office so my address wouldn't show on any packages. Henry and I unloaded everything into the studio, and it felt strange seeing my stuff in this new space. Vicente checked all the windows and doors before he left. He gave me his card again and said to call immediately if Liam showed up anywhere. 3 days later, I sat in the courtroom for the full protective order hearing. I had my folder with all the photos and texts and audio recordings. I had the witness statements from the neighbors and Henry's video. Liam sat on the other side with an attorney who kept whispering to him. The judge called me up first, and I told her everything. I started with the comments about my appearance and moved through the escalating abuse. I showed her the photos of bruises and the dented car door. I played parts of the audio recordings where Liam threatened me. I submitted the text messages where he said he'd show up at my work. Liam's attorney tried to make it sound like normal relationship drama that I was blowing up. He said couples fight and sometimes things get heated. But the judge looked at all my documentation, and the pattern was clear. She asked Liam's attorney if he had any evidence to dispute what I was saying. He didn't have anything except Liam's word that I was lying. The judge extended the protective order for 2 full years. She said Liam had to stay at least 500 feet away from me at all times. He couldn't come to my home or my workplace or anywhere I was. He couldn't contact me directly or through other people. He couldn't post about me on social media. If he violated the order even once, he'd be arrested immediately. Liam's face went red and he started to stand up, but his attorney pulled him back down. The prosecutor talked to Liam's attorney in the hallway after the hearing. They came back and the prosecutor explained the plea deal. Liam would get probation instead of jail time. He'd have to do anger management classes. He'd have to go to counseling for his body image issues. He'd have to keep the no contact order in place. If he completed everything and didn't violate the order, this wouldn't go on his permanent record. His attorney told him to take the deal because going to trial would be worse. Liam agreed in a quiet, angry voice. The judge made it official and we all left the courtroom. My first week alone in the studio was harder than I expected it to be. I jumped at every sound from the hallway. I checked the locks on my door at least 10 times before bed. I pushed a chair under the doorknob every night even though I had the deadbolt and chain. Freedom felt weird and unsafe after living in survival mode for so long. I'd wake up in the middle of the night thinking I heard Liam's voice. My body was so used to being on high alert that I couldn't relax. I barely slept that whole first week. Every car door in the parking lot made my heart race. Every footstep in the hall made me freeze. I kept my phone charged and next to me at all times. I had Vicente's number ready to call. Part of me kept waiting for Liam to show up and break down the door. The rational part of my brain knew he'd be arrested if he came near me. But the scared part didn't believe I was actually safe yet. Lena called me at the end of that first week and asked how I was doing. I told her about the hypervigilance and the fear and the chair under the door. She said everything I was feeling was completely normal. She gave me the name and number of a therapist who worked with domestic violence survivors. I called and got an appointment for the next week. The therapist's office was in a quiet building with a waiting room that felt calm. She came out to get me and brought me back to her office. I sat on a comfortable chair and she asked me to tell her what brought me in. I started talking and couldn't stop. I told her everything about Liam and the abuse and the escape. She didn't look shocked or judgmental. She just listened and took notes. When I finished, she said that hypervigilance and fear were normal responses to trauma. She said my body had learned to stay in danger mode and it would take time to feel safe again. We scheduled sessions twice a week. She said we'd work on helping my nervous system calm down and processing everything that happened. She validated that what I went through was serious and that healing would take time and support. I left her office feeling like maybe I could actually get through this. Maybe I could learn to feel safe again. Maybe freedom wouldn't always feel this scary. The next morning, I went back to work and Henry called me into his office before my shift started. He had a folder with Liam's photo printed from social media and a typed document outlining new security procedures. The photo would go at the front desk where the security guard sat, and every staff member would get a copy during the next team meeting. Henry explained that anyone who spotted Liam needed to call the police immediately without confronting him or warning him first. He arranged for security to walk me to my car at the end of every shift and gave me a special code word to text him if I felt unsafe during work hours. Seeing Liam's face printed on official security documents made the whole situation feel more real and protected at the same time. Henry filed everything in a locked cabinet and told me the gym's legal team had reviewed the plan to make sure they were doing everything possible to keep me safe. I felt my shoulders relax slightly during my shift, knowing that my workplace was actively watching out for me instead of pretending nothing was wrong. 2 days later, Daisy called and asked if I could stop by the leasing office after work. She had paperwork for a special program the apartment complex offered to domestic violence survivors. The program included anonymous mail handling where the office would accept my packages and letters without putting my unit number on anything. They also waived the pet deposit completely if I wanted to get a dog for security and companionship. Daisy explained that the property management company had partnered with local domestic violence organizations to create these accommodations after several residents had needed them. She handed me information about the program and assured me that only she and one other manager knew about my situation. I signed the paperwork and felt grateful that these small changes made me feel supported rather than like a victim everyone pitied. The anonymous mail handling especially helped since I worried about Liam somehow finding out my exact unit number. Vicente called me the following week with an update on Liam's case. Liam had enrolled in his mandated counseling program and attended his first 2 sessions without missing any. He also completed his intake appointment for the anger management classes that were part of his probation requirements. Vicente told me the case remained open and active, which meant any violation of the protective order would result in immediate arrest and jail time. The prosecutor was monitoring everything closely and had flagged Liam's file as high priority because of the escalating violence pattern. Vicente reminded me to document anything suspicious and to call him directly if I saw Liam anywhere near me. Knowing the system was actually working and that people were paying attention made me feel slightly more confident that the protective order meant something real. I went home and blocked Liam's number in my phone along with all his social media accounts. I unfollowed and blocked anyone who might report back to him about what I was posting or doing. The burner phone stayed active and charged in my nightstand drawer as backup for emergencies. Cutting off even the possibility of contact felt like closing a door I had been holding open way too long. I could not see his messages or calls anymore, which meant I could not obsess over what he might be saying or threatening. The silence felt strange after months of constant texts and notifications, but it also felt necessary for moving forward. I started setting small goals for myself instead of just surviving each day. 3 consecutive nights of decent sleep became my first target, and I actually managed it by the end of that week. Cooking one real meal instead of eating snacks and crackers became another goal, and I made pasta with vegetables that I ate at my tiny kitchen table. Going one day without checking over my shoulder constantly seemed impossible, but I tried anyway, and noticed myself getting slightly better at it. Each tiny victory felt significant after months of just trying to make it through without something bad happening. I bought a journal and started tracking these small wins because my therapist suggested it would help me see progress when everything felt overwhelming. Writing down that I slept through the night or that I went to the grocery store without panicking made the improvements feel more real and concrete. Lena called me at the end of my first month in the studio apartment to check how I was doing. She celebrated my progress with the sleep and the cooking, and reminded me that healing was not a straight line. Some days would be harder than others, and setbacks were completely normal parts of recovery. She told me about a support group for domestic violence survivors that met every week at the community center on Wednesday evenings. Lena thought I might benefit from hearing other women's stories and knowing I was not alone in this experience. She sent me the meeting information and encouraged me to try it at least once without any pressure to keep going if it did not feel right. I saved the details in my phone and told myself I would think about it. The idea of sitting in a room with strangers and talking about what happened felt scary, but also maybe helpful. I showed up to my first support group meeting on a Wednesday evening 3 weeks later. The community center had a small room with chairs arranged in a circle, and about 8 women already sitting there. A facilitator welcomed me and explained that everything shared in the group stayed confidential, and that I could participate as much or as little as I wanted. I listened to women at different stages of leaving and recovery talk about their experiences. Some had just left their abusers within the past month, while others had been out for years and were rebuilding their entire lives. One woman talked about the hypervigilance, and how it took almost a year before she stopped jumping at every sound. Another woman shared that she went back to the school and got a degree after her ex told her she was too stupid to ever amount to anything. Hearing their stories made me realize I was not crazy for feeling scared, even though I was physically safe now. Knowing other people had survived similar situations and were actually doing okay gave me hope that my own path forward was possible. I went back the next week and the week after that. 3 months after moving out of the apartment I shared with Liam, I realized something during my morning routine. I had gone an entire week without thinking about him or checking the protective order expiration date. The mental space he used to occupy in my head was slowly shrinking as I built a life that was actually mine. I could go whole days now without wondering what he was doing or if he was planning something. My therapist pointed out that this was significant progress, and that reclaiming my mental energy was just as important as physical safety. The constant fear and vigilance were starting to ease even though I still had moments of panic. I noticed I was sleeping better and eating more regularly, and that my hands did not shake as much when unexpected things happened. Small, normal moments felt good again instead of just feeling like breaks between crises. Henry pulled me aside at work one afternoon and mentioned that the gym was hiring for a supervisor position. He encouraged me to apply and said my reliability and growth through adversity made me a strong candidate for the role. The position would mean more responsibility and better pay, plus it would look good on my resume for future opportunities. I told him I would think about it, even though the idea felt foreign and exciting at the same time. For years, Liam had told me I was worthless, and that nobody would ever want to promote someone like me. Hearing Henry say I was a strong candidate made me wonder if maybe I actually was capable of more than I had been allowing myself to believe. I filled out the application that evening and submitted it before I could talk myself out of trying. I went to the animal shelter the following weekend and walked through the rows of kennels looking at dogs. A small mixed breed with wiry brown fur and alert ears caught my attention. The shelter volunteer explained that she was about 2 years old and had been found as a stray. She was good with people and other animals, and she had already been spayed and vaccinated. I filled out the adoption paperwork and brought her home that same day. Having another living being in the studio apartment changed everything immediately. She alerted me to sounds in the hallway, which actually helped, because I knew when to pay attention versus when things were normal building noises. She needed walks and feeding times, which gave me routine and structure beyond just surviving each day. I named her Scout because she was always investigating everything and keeping watch. Taking care of her gave me purpose and made the apartment feel less empty and scary. She slept on a dog bed next to mine, and her presence helped me relax enough to sleep through most nights. Daisy stopped by one afternoon to drop off some mail that got mixed up, and mentioned that 2 other women in the complex were also domestic violence survivors who used the same housing program. She asked if I wanted their contact info, and I said yes immediately, because the idea of having neighbors who understood felt comforting. We started a group chat where we checked in daily and shared resources like which therapists had openings or which food banks had the best hours. Meeting them for coffee in the courtyard the first time felt awkward, until one of them showed us the pepper spray she kept on her keys, and we all pulled ours out too and laughed about our matching safety keychains. We texted each other when we heard weird noises or felt scared, and knowing they were just buildings away made the fear less heavy. One of them worked nights, so she would text me good morning when she got home, and I would text her good night before bed, which created this rhythm of checking that we were all okay. The support group facilitator mentioned that several members attended a self-defense class together at the community center on Saturday mornings. I signed up that week and showed up nervous but determined to learn how to protect myself physically, instead of just running away. The instructor was patient and focused on practical moves for getting away from someone rather than fighting back, which felt more realistic for my actual size and strength. Learning where to strike and how to break different types of grabs made me feel capable instead of helpless for the first time since leaving. The other women from support group were there, and we practiced together and encouraged each other when moves felt hard or scary. After class, we would get coffee and talk about our progress and plans, which made Saturday morning something I looked forward to instead of dreaded. Scout came with me sometimes and waited outside with the instructor's dog, which made me smile because even my dog was building a social life. 6 months after moving into the studio, I was sitting on my small couch with Scout curled up against my leg, and I realized I felt genuinely peaceful. I had signed a lease in my name alone without anyone co-signing or questioning my ability to pay rent. I cooked meals in my tiny kitchen without apologizing for the smell or the mess or taking too long. I looked in the bathroom mirror while brushing my teeth and saw just my face without hearing Liam's voice listing everything wrong with my nose or skin or weight. The apartment was mine, and the furniture was mine, and the decisions about what to watch or eat or do were completely mine. I still had hard days where I checked the locks multiple times or jumped at sudden sounds, but those moments were getting fewer and further between. My savings account was growing steadily, and my work performance had improved enough that Henry submitted my name for the supervisor position. The support group and self-defense class and informal network with my neighbors created this web of people who cared whether I was okay. Scout needed walks and meals, which gave structure to my days beyond just surviving. I was building a life where I felt safe and supported and finally free to become whoever I wanted to be, without someone telling me I was worthless or ugly or wrong. That's how it all went down from my side. But now I want to hear yours. What would you have done differently? Drop a comment below. I'll be reading through them. You always bring the best insights.